again, that dovetails nicely into the next question that I'll ask Suzuki-san to start with. Really just to give some practical examples of how ESG integration into the REITs has led to some financial, tangible financial outcomes that were positive, and maybe some of the non-financial parts of that investment and integration. Can you just discuss a couple examples?
Yes. So starting with financial example, it's not visible enough, but there are some, the positive benefits to us. In terms of financial side, the good example is the sustainability bond, which is available for sustainability good funds to borrow the issue. So, and also the shareholders are selecting REITs by the sustainability performance. So the many investors are now removing poor sustainability performing funds out of the universe. So generally speaking, these the good sustainability performance is bringing the good benefit financial terms to us. But even more important thing is non-financial things. That's my honest feeling. More and more people, including tenants, service providers, and also even in a recruiting time, more and more young generation people are coming to us because we are the good performer for sustainability. So that is making our business better on a qualitative point of view. So all these things are making better for us.
Great, thank you very much. That's a great series of examples. Calvin, would you be able to give us a couple examples from Link REIT?
Yeah, Christian, I can probably do that as well. And before I do that, let me give some background into how we're approaching this discussion on ESG at Link. I think we have been inundated with a lot of different data requests, right? What are your various ESG initiatives? And what we're seeing is that different regions will have different focuses. And that's been a challenge to manage, especially as we get more and more questions. So recently, what we've really done is kind of simplify things, bring the discussion back to the very simple basics. And I've alluded to this earlier on in my discussion where, what is the purpose of a REIT? Well, we came down to really two things. One is that we're able to generate steady income, steady returns for our unit holders. And the second is that we're able to do this for as long as we can, right? So it's about the steady returns and the longevity of returns. So when we look at it from this standpoint, each of these two components can be further broken down. Steady returns is very simple. It's based on optimizing rental rates. And then number two, managing costs, right? Increasing income, reducing costs. On the longevity side, it's about improving the resilience of the portfolio that we have right now. And then the second aspect will be about having that crystal ball to figure out what's coming on in the future. What are the issues we have to deal with? Now, with these four areas, we have different initiatives. We can start categorizing activities. So under optimizing rents, it's about being able to look at placemaking. How do we create places that tenants want to be? One of the key things that we've discussed and understood with COVID, and I think this is around the world, is that people want to be in healthy buildings. To be in a healthy building, we have to invest in the certifications. To achieve the certifications, we have to put the mechanisms, the systems in place to get, let's say, WELL, LEED, and so forth. The financial value from that is then being able to bring in those MNC tenants that some people are looking for. I think Simon's alluded to this as well. Some governments will say we will only rent in certain buildings with a certain quality, and that you can then quantify in terms of the stability of the rent, the quality of the tenants that's coming in. Under the managing cost side, I think that this is a very straightforward discussion. Again, environmental initiatives, energy, wastewater. We have managed to cut our energy consumption, absolute energy consumption, by about 40% since 2012, 2013. And that leads to annual savings of 125 million Hong Kong dollars every year. And then as you add it all up, it's quite a significant amount of money. From the managing costs, we're also looking at renewable energy. And that actually is bringing in revenue into our portfolio, somewhere about $10 million. We've actually installed the largest privately owned solar PV array in Hong Kong. It is modest, 3.6 megawatt hours. It's 3.6 megawatt capacity, a very modest amount, but it does bring in revenue. So that talks about the steady returns component of what we do. If we jump over to the longevity of returns, improving resilience is about making sure we're doing the assessments of what properties might be at risk for what type of climate issues. CREM, Carbon Risk and Real Estate Monitor Program, has been a very good initiative for us to identify the value at risk. Now, this is something that gives us a financial assessment of what we might need to do, why, and when, and is useful for future planning. And then on the crystal ball side, thinking further, eventually we'll be looking at these issues in terms of how does it affect valuation, and that is a key area that's developing. So there's definitely a lot of value that we've been able to articulate and quantify. I think that as the industry continues to move forward, we're going to see a lot more focus on the insurance premiums, evaluation, and build from there.
Great, Calvin. We're going to talk about that climate risk assessment and value at risk as well at the end of the discussion too, because you're spot on that that's something that's top of mind right now with investors. Quantifying the risk, the costs associated to climate change is becoming really a big topic. And internally, we as well have also sort of developed our own value at risk so we can report to our customers what our portfolio looks like. It's particularly the case in Asia where our major cities are also located in areas which could become impacted by climate change more directly than other places. So it is definitely a big topic. Simon, could you also give a couple examples of how ESG integration has actually had a financial or non-financial impact on Cromwell?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot earlier about governance, and I think one of the important factors in 2019 was when the board instilled ESG targets in the KPIs of the senior executive team, and then that has flowed down through the organization so that there are specific KPIs for various teams relevant to their particular functions. That's then led to a renewed focus when we think about our financing and the sustainability KPIs there. Some important factors there to discuss. BREEAM certification, that's about the quality of the assets. GRESB, which obviously is all encompassing. But the third one, which is relatively new in a concept in Asia, is a green lease. And this is really the banks working with us to work with our tenants to address the scope 3 or the third-party energy consumption. So many of us are facing the challenge of, while we can control our own emissions and consumption within the areas that we control in a building, but if you have a single tenanted building that's on triple net lease, then you don't actually get access to a lot of the building data that's controlled by the tenant. And so one of the challenges that we're all going to face by 2030 is the introduction of scope 3 targets mandated by ISSB. And so that's something for the next 5 years as industry. We have to really get together and work with our key suppliers, such as the electricity grids, the energy providers, ultimately, to be able to understand how do we best improve the scope 3 and work with our tenants and our stakeholders in that regard. In Europe, at least we can access a large part of the grid is renewable. So around 35% of our energy that we source off the grid, not just on site, but off the grid, 35% is from renewable or low carbon emission energy. So that's, again, something that the governments will take a lead in. So over time, some practical examples we feel will actually improve as the technology improves. So smart water meters, greater efficiency out of our building management systems. That's something that we will continue to see involve. A lot of startup capital is being put into this area, and it's something that we as property owners and REITs will benefit from over the next few years.
Thank you. Sharifa, also, could you give us a couple of practical examples of how ESG integration has had a financial or non-financial impact on performance?
Sure, Christian. Contrary to popular belief that investors always want to get profits and tend to look at ESG as something which is long-term in nature, and so costs sometimes get shelved. We recently announced our net zero targets. It's just scope 1 and 2 for now. We are going to be doing work on scope 3. And so we started noticing something on our share price during this time. As soon as the announcement was made, our share price went up the next day. It actually has been moving up, and we've seen a movement in the positive side of about between 5 to 10%. And that's something that's very, very encouraging. And I would say that's one of the most significant financial measures that we have seen as a result of us making a commitment to reach climate targets. And then on the non-financial side, in the last 1 or 2 years, as we have started doing more and more in our sustainability journey, we have seen a lot more business partners coming up to us, expressing interest to work with us. We have seen a lot more of our clients coming up to us and asking us to provide guidance to them on how they can also start their journey. And within the organization, more and more of our staff now understands what ESG is and is able to actually carry out that conversation with clients. And the culture of ESG has actually intensified in the organization. So those are some of the examples that I can cite, Christian.
Christian, I gotta jump in here, and Sharifa, I think we need to have another session for you to educate all of us. I think you might have unlocked the key, right? When you said that your share prices have gone up after these net zero commitments. So we need to learn.
Amazing.
We need to learn how to do this communication. So congratulations on getting that done.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to share.
Yeah, we had an example when we're on the road with a Euro bond issue in 2020, and a very significant Dutch investor actually, after 3 minutes into the roadshow, said, "I'm sorry, we'll have to stop it here." I was like, "Why? What have we said?" And they looked up the MSCI ESG rating, and they said you were subpar. You were below BBB, and that was like the first shock moment of, aha, this is really actually serious, that a number of investors are putting a line in the sand that if you're not above BBB or above in an MSCI rating, they're not going to invest in you. So that's a practical example of where finance actually drove a change in behavior. And 3 years later, we worked to a AA rating, and that investor actually contacted us 6 months ago and bought some of our bonds subsequent to that. So it's not just the equity side where you can see it; you can also see it on the credit side.
Well, congratulations.
That's
Well done, Simon.
So Simon, staying with you, in Europe, we've discussed this, I think you touched on it already. There seems to be a clear emergence between in the office market of a two-tier market, with tenants increasingly wanting very high amenity post-COVID, wanting energy efficiency. Do you see a real valuation and rent premium for this? And as such, are you spending money to try to up the standard of the properties that you have, or recycling assets to get rid of some of the ones that might be CapEx heavy in the future?
Yeah. Yep. And Christian, we don't spend money, we invest on behalf of our unit holders. Which would be the same for all the panelists here. So really in office, post-COVID, the work from home phenomenon has been something that everyone around the world has been adjusting to. I guess in colder climates, air conditioning, which also acts as an air filtration system, isn't as prevalent in some of the older buildings in Europe. So in Asia, we take AC for granted. But in Europe, post-COVID, there's been this great shift by operating offices of tenants, looking for air filtration systems. And so that's something that you can retrofit a building. It doesn't have to be a brand new building. So we're looking at retrofitting on a number of factors. It's not just about the overall amenity of the building. A lot of employers are looking at ways of encouraging or luring their staff back into the office. And so, we're seeing that trend that if you've got a well-located, modern amenity building that offers staff amenity that attracts them, then we're seeing a premium tenants are prepared to pay much higher rents. We had a 1980 building where the tenant 2 years ago left the building. They were paying about 150 euros a square metre. If we had just rolled that building over to try and release today, we may not have got it leased in the last 2 years, and we certainly wouldn't have got any rent bump. We've invested around 25 million euros in the building, which is about double the value of the property. And we're already leased at rents double what we were previously achieving. So we're now achieving rents at 350 to 360 euros a square metre. And importantly, from when we started the project, we actually thought we were only going to be able to increase our rents by about 100 euros. So the fact that we've been able to increase rents by 200 again demonstrates the acceleration of this trend by employers prepared to pay the higher rent, which in the scheme of an overall service company, rent is not material. What is more material is the labour productivity and being able to bring that collaboration back into the office. Tenants have been prepared to pay the higher rent. So we can see that in Milan through the vacancy rates. So total Milan vacancy is 9%, but grade A vacancy is sub 3%. Amsterdam, similar, grade A vacancy sub 3%. There's really a lack of this modern amenity building that tenants are gravitating to. So absolutely, we can generate 6 to 8% yield on costs from upgrading these buildings that in other markets might be considered maintenance capex. For us, it's certainly about a return on the invested capital as well as future-proofing the portfolio.
Thank you, Simon. Great. And definitely that flight to quality is evident in most markets now we see globally, inclusive in Asia. Suzuki-san, this was one question I think you wanted to address, was really how can REITs align their strategies for the specific needs and expectations of investors and stakeholders?
I think communication plays a key part of this question. Investors and stakeholders would like to know the information, how each fund and each company is doing for the sustainability. So we are doing a lot of disclosures, including annual ESG report, and we are trying to include a lot of information on a website. But at the same time, we are doing a lot of ESG focusing meetings with shareholders, as well as we are holding investor presentation, just focusing on ESG every few years. But not only for these investor focusing event, we sometimes occasionally going to industry association conferences, for example, shopping center show or something like that, and showing our efforts on ESG. All these are creating a good communication and good understanding about activities by a lot of people. So, other REITs should do such activities that will improve in the satisfactions by the investors, I believe.
Thank you. And Sharif, I know this is a question that's near and dear to your heart. It's really about whether fund management companies should receive more credit in managing clients' footprints rather than it all going to the clients. Maybe you can answer that and expand on what that really means.
Yeah, and this is a question that we have at board level within our FM managers. And so why I think this question is a very interesting question is because, Christian, we don't own the assets of our clients, but then we have got the duty of maintaining these assets. And so if we took the example of fittings that we put out into a commercial asset, let's say solar panels, or we do work to improve the coefficiency of the chillers, and this results in savings in energy or water consumption. Now, Christian, the reduction in the carbon actually all goes to our clients, and rightfully, because they own the asset, and GHG is very much an accounting system. But I really think that some of this potentially can actually come to facilities managers like us, because a lot of the energy savings and water saving come from the proactive work that we put into such assets. And so some things that I try to tell maybe standard setters, or I hope that they are listening in, is that maybe a way would be to perhaps give some of this credit for us in managing our scope 3 emission, particularly around transportation, or bringing those equipment into those buildings, or even reduction of some of the waste that gets generated. We can get some of the credit out of that as well. And we also provide our clients funding to fund some of these investments, because our clients are not really, some of them are not willing to make the upfront investment. So we have got a zero financing scheme where we come up with the upfront investment. So some of that credit potentially also, I feel, could go towards reducing our finance emission. And I'm really hoping the standard setters will be listening to this, and when they are looking at making certain changes to the way we account for emission.